that were of a salacious nature, and so he got to run against Alan Keyes. And if you're Barack Obama and you're running against Alan Keyes in Illinois, you know, you're going to win. But be that as it may, I was wrong about that. But I make that observation and I relate that anecdote because I think it is precisely the conundrum and the dilemma of Obama's presidency. He ran, I believe, more so than any major party nominee since Jimmy Carter, as someone who was going to change Washington and not allow Washington to change him, was going to be a bipartisan agent of change and not a partisan, was somebody who was going to bring us together, and you know, somebody who was not an ideologue. He was a problem solver. And his campaign, I would argue, was more thematic than issue-driven. It was more about hope and change and us being the answer that we've been waiting for more than a specific policy prescription. And I think the problem is that when you run as that and then you try to govern differently, it becomes a serious problem, particularly for independent voters who were drawn to you for one reason and then find you governing differently. So, for example, the critique by the Obama campaign of Hillary Clinton was, we can't nominate her, she's too polarizing and divisive. But now you have the Gallup organization. This is not me, this is Gallup. This isn't Rasmussen. This is not a Republican pollster saying that Barack Obama is the most polarizing president in terms of how voters are responding to his leadership since World War II and the modern advent of polling as we know it today. He has a 65-point gap between the job approval of Democrats and the job approval of Republicans. 88% of Democrats approve of the job he's doing, only 23% of Republicans. That's the largest gap recorded for an incumbent president since the Gallup organization began polling in the 1930s. So, and then you look at the precipitous fall in the job approval numbers. You know, this is a president who I think it's fair to say on the day he was inaugurated had some of the most stratospheric personal and job approval numbers, and had such great expectations. And yet, it's the most rapid and precipitous descent in job approval numbers for a first-term president, again, on record. A fall from 70% to between 45 and 50%, depending upon which poll you look at. In the Rasmussen survey, it's 45 approve and 53% disapprove. If you look at the CBS New York Times poll, it's a little higher, about 47. I think Gallup is 48. You average them all out, it's basically, you know, below 50 but above, you know, 46. Now, what's really interesting about those numbers is the gap in intensity. Among those 45 to 50% who say they approve of the job that Obama's doing, only 23% say they strongly approve. But among the 50 to 55% who say they disapprove, 42% say they strongly disapprove. That means 80% of all the people who disapprove of Obama's job performance do so strongly and with great intensity. And especially in an off-year election, intensity really matters because it drives voter turnout and it determines who goes to the polls. Now, how did this happen? How did the fortunes of this mercurial and clearly gifted political figure change so rapidly? I would argue, in the end, it's because even though people have great admiration for Obama's political skills and talents, I think he's gone in a direction in terms of policies and issues that the majority of the American people either disagree with him on or the stated policy results have not resulted. And I'm not going to get into this in too lengthy of a way, but let me just talk about two that I think are really dragging his numbers down. The first is the economy. Now, one of the things about being the President of the United States is you got to play the cards that are dealt you. So if you're George W. Bush, you come into office in January, and by March of 2001, you're in a recession, and you got to deal with it. And obviously, much easier hand to be dealt than Obama did. He inherited the worst crisis in our financial system since the Great Depression. No question about it. But the key is, his answer was the stimulus bill. That was the first bill that he took up. Remember, his promise to Ted Kennedy prior to Kennedy's death, during the primaries, I don't want to say as a quid pro quo or in exchange for, but certainly an understanding. When Kennedy said, I'm going to endorse you, I'm going to anoint you against the Clintons, the only thing I want your word on is that H.R. 1, SB 1, the first bill we take up will be health care reform. I've waited my entire life for this. This is my valedictory. This is what I want. And Obama committed to that. Well, obviously, on September 24th, Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt. The Dow is dropping 700 to 1,000 points a day. We do TARP 1, we do TARP 2. Obama walks into the Oval Office. He's facing a financial crisis and an economy in distress. His answer is an economic stimulus plan that was marketed and passed, promising 4 million new jobs. We were told that half of those jobs would be created by the end of 2010. We sit here today and 2.8 million jobs have vanished. So you have a 7 million job swing in what was promised and what has happened so far. Now, maybe before the 2010 or 12 elections, that picture will change. But that's the picture we're dealing with today. Secondly, we were told that unemployment, which was 7.7% on the day the stimulus plan was passed, would not go over 8% if we passed that plan. And if you'll remember, the vote in the House took place before many members were even able to read it and thoroughly digest it. And we were told, we have to pass this, we have to do it now, we have to stabilize the markets. Well, as you know, today unemployment is in the high 9%, approaching 10%. And if you include the underemployed and those who have dropped out of the labor force because they're no longer looking for work, the adult unemployment rate, effective rate, is between 16 and 17%. And in some states, states that will be critical battlegrounds in 2010, like Michigan, like Nevada, the actual unemployment rate, not the effective rate, the actual reported rate, is between 15 and 20%. I can tell you, having been a part of the Reagan political operation in the 1982 off years when we were dealing with the 82 recession, that is not a good place to be. We lost, I believe, 23 or 24 House seats. If this number doesn't change for Obama, it's going to be bigger. Now, the other problem exacerbating this is the state of the housing industry. You've got, today in America,